conference been going so far?
Okay.
I think it's been
This is
fun. These mics pick
I
up.
think so. It works for me.
Yeah.
Take it. Okay. Yeah. That works. Thank you.
I don't want you to couch it just to leave it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Margaret. Osita Iroegbu. Nice to meet you. Sticking to my 8 minutes.
I'm sorry, you okay? Do you need some more? One, I'll give you George. But I'll fucking find some for you. I'm sorry, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of water,
no
but
problem.
the water fountain's right around the corner.
Okay.
You can wait a few seconds if you'd like to go get some.
Thank you.
We are gonna get started now though, so if you gotta
Yeah,
go.
that's fine. Somebody may be trying to get me a soda, so
Okay.
I'm fine. I can hold on. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. I'm so sorry. All right. Do you want me to follow up and you can? We don't have everybody, but we have enough. Okay, everybody, we are going to get started for real this time, so if you would please make yourselves comfortable, we'll get going. I'm going to turn it over to my co-moderator, Osita, and she's going to start things off. Thank you very much.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Awesome. So we hope that you had some empowering and galvanizing workshops and sessions thus far. And we will continue as we welcome you to our third plenary panel, which focuses on domestic issues. And so the theme included in this plenary panel discussion includes issues of the Black community, domestic costs of war, immigrant struggles, labor, and LGBTQ issues. And so again, I am Osita Iroegbu. I am from Richmond, Virginia. I am a community educator, advocate, and mentor. And I will be co-chairing this plenary session with Ms. Kat McNeal.
Leaders for Freedom, Justice, and Equality based right here in Richmond. And I guess I will turn the mic back over to Osita after just handling some brief housekeeping stuff. I know things have been going late. That's one of the major hazards of an event like this where we'll have so many important things to say. We're going to endeavor not to have this one go too much later by limiting our speakers to 8 minutes. We have, here in the front row, my sister, Amber. She's got two signs. One says you have 1 minute remaining. The next says time's up. When your time is up, your time is up. And I'm going to take the mic. I know it's not going to come to that. I know you're all great at timekeeping, but that's how we're going to do it. One last brief housekeeping announcement before I turn the mic back over so that Osita can introduce our first topic and our first round of excellent speakers, and that pertains to name tags. Please be wearing your name tag at all times. Please let it be visible. This is for security reasons. If you're not wearing it, people will be constantly asking you where your name tag is. Thank you so much, and Osita, back to you.
All right, so we will begin with the first two themes of Black community and domestic costs of war. I will be introducing these speakers, and they will present in the order in which I will introduce them. First, we will have Ms. Margaret Kimberley, editor and senior columnist at Black Agenda Report. She will be presenting on exposing America's human rights violations. Following her, we will have Saladin Muhammad, co-coordinator of the Southern Workers Assembly, who will present on a topic of Unite the Battlefronts of Black Resistance to Stop the War on Black America. We will also have, coming in via a recorded video, Mr. Malcolm Suber from Take 'em Down NOLA New Orleans Worker Group, who will present on the struggle to remove the Confederate statue in New Orleans. And then following that, we will have the theme of domestic costs of war. And our speaker will be Pat Elder, National Coalition to Protect Student Privacy. And without further ado, Ms. Margaret Kimberley.
Thank you. Took off my shoe, so. Okay, good evening, everybody. Afternoon, sorry, I'm rushing the day along. It's still afternoon. How are you all? I chose to, there's so many topics I could touch on, but I chose to talk today specifically about human rights, or rather the lack thereof, here in the United States. It's fortuitous this week that we saw some examples of the lack of human rights in this country, which is in direct contradiction to everything that we are told. First, I'll start off with some good news, which I said last night. Reverend Edward Pinkney is free. He is out of jail. He is no longer incarcerated in Michigan. He was tried and convicted of a very minor offense, allegedly forging a signature on an election petition, which is a misdemeanor in that state. Recall petition. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ralph Pointer. But his real crime was fighting the Maytag Corporation. His real crime was fighting against the emergency manager system in the state of Michigan, which disenfranchises mostly black communities throughout that state, not just in Detroit. But he's out on parole. He never should have been incarcerated in the first place. But that is, we Americans don't like to think that there are political prisoners here, but he certainly was one. But as of a few days ago, no longer. Yesterday, we got bad news, the worst news. The police officer who murdered Philando Castile in Minnesota was acquitted. And these things are always so hard. I always say I shouldn't be surprised, and yet I am angered and saddened. It's like a kick in the stomach to have heard this actually not surprising information about police murder, one that we saw on video. But it never seems to matter if there's video, if there's photographs, if there are witnesses. It never seems to count. But if you listen to what we're told, the indoctrination that we receive in this country, you would think that these things never happened. We're told all the time that America is a great country, a good country. Former President Obama, one of the things that annoyed him about me so much, there were so many things, but he always referred to America as being exceptional and indispensable. And that means that anyone who says that thinks that America is superior, and of course that the rest of the world is dispensable. And it's hard to convey the depth and the extent of those lies, but I'm going to try. We live in a country that's one of the worst violators of human rights on the planet. Violates the rights of its own citizens, the people of other nations, and the rights of other governments too. And one of the reasons that Obama and others say these things is that our government seeks to diminish everyone's rights, and basically to say that no one has a right even to exist. But this history goes back a long way. You know, it's interesting being here in Virginia, and aside from being in Washington, D.C. and going nearby, I've never been in the state before, but this state is the epicenter of the American colonial project. It wasn't really Plymouth Rock, it was Virginia. This is the state where the first enslaved Africans came to Jamestown. And we hear King James and about Pocahontas. It's very interesting how these things are still latched onto with such ferocity. And it's not possible to be in a place like this and not make the linkage with what we're living with today. The settler colonial project, the two terrible genocides of the indigenous population and of enslaved Africans, we're living with the legacy of those acts today. Everyone knows, or should know, that the United States has the biggest prison population of any other country in the world. The largest number of incarcerated people, more than 2 million, and the largest percentage of its population behind bars. And a lot of those people are kept legally as unpaid laborers, as slave laborers. If you call a call center, and if the person on the other end is not in India, they are probably behind bars in an American prison. And if there were truth in advertising, if products said made in prison, clothing, uniforms, furniture would all tell the tale of the extent of this atrocity. And it's only been in recent years that anyone attempted to find out how many people are killed by the police in this country. And we have to thank, of course, the Malcolm X grassroots movement, because they were the first to take yes? A serious look. And they told us that every 28 hours, a black person is killed generally by police, but by vigilantes, by private security, all of whom act like a modern-day slave patrol. But we now know that every year more than 1,000 people are killed by the police. It's 3 people, okay, it's like 2.8, not quite 3. 3 people every day are killed by the police. And I find it interesting that when we read in the corporate media about human rights violation, they always go thousands of miles away to some other part of the world. And when the grossest human rights violation is taking place right here in this country, and it's based on the legacy that I talked about. There was a story in the New York Times a few days ago, I don't know if you saw it, about the opioid epidemic, which affects white people more, I think. But anyway, this article was about police helping addicts, and it's something about friends in blue or something like that. And addicts find a friend in blue. And we'll remember back in the 80s and the 90s when the crack cocaine epidemic began, this was an excuse to lock black people up, some of whom are still locked up. And I never talk about this issue without mentioning the fact that Barack Obama, his Justice Department, opposed giving those people who were sentenced under those terrible draconian laws, opposed giving them the ability to request resentencing. Not to let them out, just to ask to be let out. But Obama and Eric Holder said that should not happen. So, 1 minute. Oh my God, I was talking and talking and talking. But anyway, we're here to talk about the wars at home and abroad. And the wars abroad are quite obvious. The United States has made a mockery of all its claims about human rights around the world. Libya was destroyed. There's an ongoing human rights crisis. African immigrants and dark-skinned Libyans are literally being sold into slavery, and that is because of Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. There would not be millions of Syrian refugees if it were not for them. I find it amazing that the press can talk about the Syrian refugee crisis and not talk about the fact that it was the United States making this decision to try to destroy this country, to have its proxies, Saudi Arabia and Turkey and others, send terrorists into this country and destroy it and create a terrible human rights crisis. So I'm going to close by saying, remember, when you see something about Russia, Russian police don't have guns. And the protests that are being ginned up by people in this country here and people are arrested, nobody gets shot. Just keep that in mind. So I thank you.
We will now have Mr. Saladin Muhammad.
Greetings to everybody.
Greetings, Brother Muhammad. Uh, the intensifying state economic and political attacks on the black masses and the working class and oppressed and dispossessed of the oppressed peoples inside of the U.S. are the sharpest examples of the U.S. war at home, violating both U.S. constitutional and international human rights. Therefore, some of the forces within the Black liberation movement have promoted the slogan, "Stop the War on Black America." The development of the U.S. to this current imperialist stage is marked by a history of political, social, economic, and military wars and domination to maintain the oppression and subjugation of the black masses, to accumulate capital, and to expand its domination throughout the Americas and globally. This has been a major factor shaping the black national consciousness and the history of national and international black resistance, including the development of a military wing of the Black liberation movement that carried out struggles against at least one of the armed forces of the state. The spontaneous character of the national black resistance and the failure to develop a national framework to unite the fragmented forces of the black national liberation movement around a strategic program in this racist and neo-fascist period has not built the national confidence of the black masses to see the Black liberation movement as a leading, powerful, and transformative social force. While those on the left see opposition to imperialist wars as a fundamental obligation of our internationalism, hopefully most of us would agree that oppressed people fighting for centuries to end their oppression and exploitation, experiencing various degrees of unity, compromises, and acts of betrayal within and by allies, do not become internationalists simply by a moral consciousness and a compassion alone, while very, very important. Oppressed people want to know how the struggle opposing U.S. wars and political domination abroad relate to our struggles against oppression, exploitation, and state violence that represents one of the U.S. wars against oppressed and exploited nations and peoples within its national borders. It is the left's role to help oppressed and exploited people to see, feel, and understand that these struggles are connected in the struggle against a global capitalist system reinforced by the U.S. military-industrial complex. The forces in the national Black liberation movement must develop a level of strategic unity to enable the black masses to see ourselves as a transformative and revolutionary social force and not simply involved in the civil rights movement to reform the capitalist system. The struggles identified as part of the Black liberation, the civil rights and the Black liberation movement have been catalysts helping to create the conditions for the emergence, stimulation, and escalation of other social movements and for uniting organized political forces emerging out of those movements. However, the spontaneous state of the current Black national resistance has not yet unified the many single-issue struggles and social movements into common battlefronts, anchoring and leading a conscious national Black liberation movement with a strategic program. Without common battlefronts, including against U.S. wars, the single-issue struggles can become isolated and smashed by an increasing repressive state. The holding of a National Assembly for Black liberation to unite the many single-issue struggles and social movements into common national battlefronts with the revolutionary political organizations must be a strategic juncture for rebuilding the national Black liberation movement under the leadership of the Black working class. These national battlefronts must show how the U.S. wars abroad intensify the oppression and attacks on the Black masses and other oppressed and working class sectors within the U.S. Following the urban rebellions and the rise of Black Power movement in the 1960s, national liberation and anti-imperialist demands began to emerge amidst the civil rights movement. The Black Power conferences that were held in 67 and 68 and the subsequent national councils conferences that were held in the early 70s were attempts to unite and frame the struggles of Black people as a struggle against the form of domestic colonialism like the Black liberation struggles were taking place in South Africa, Azania. This placed the struggle against racism within the context of an international struggle against colonialism that were the foremost struggles against imperialism in that period. There were class differences and ideological differences at these conferences that characterized the relationship of the Black liberation movement. I'm looking for time, and I looked away from the sentence on my thingy. I tell you, something. Black workers at the point of production and service helped to sharpen the importance of the Black working class and the Black liberation struggle and the need for it to have an anti-capitalist and anti-imperialist program. This was not simply an ideological declaration expressed by some political and ideological forces. Black workers had to demonstrate their power, leadership through organization, political education, and action. Black worker caucuses brought Black liberation movement demands into the trade unions and the labor movement. Black workers at the points of production and service helped to give the Black masses a sense of our collective power to impact the profits and the operations of the capitalist system and the state. For too long, many on the left have refused to recognize the existence of a national Black liberation movement and simply saw the struggles of the Black masses as an anti-racist struggle that can only become a revolutionary force when they become politically united as part of a radicalized majority white U.S. workers movement. Some, but not enough, white workers have demonstrated their revolutionary working class consciousness, but they have not been the catalyst for the U.S. anti-capitalist and anti-imperialist movement in the past 60 years. The struggles for U.S. reforms inside of the U.S. imperialist countries with no connection to revolutionary movements fighting for fundamental changes and led by the Black working class can leave the Black masses vulnerable to embracing aspects of national chauvinism. They took my job, all kinds of national chauvinist expressions when the struggle to reform the capitalist system, to make it better, does not see itself as a part of transforming this monster and creating a new society. The U.S. ruling class of both major parties understood this, which led to the Bush administration's, I'm looking the wrong way. I apologize. Which led to the Bush administration's appointment of Colin Powell as chairman of the Military Joint Chiefs of Staff in '89, and in 2000, the position of Secretary of State. Obama was also supported by the U.S. ruling class for the same reason. The struggle among the Black left was not at that time to build a unity to mobilize the masses of Black people, but struggled between ourselves and were not able to go deeper. Thank you.
Thank you. Your expressions bring to mind the Black female literary giant Audre Lorde's quote, "There's no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives." We'll now like to go to Mr. Martin Suber, who will join us via recorded video. Mr. Malcolm Suber, thank you.
And while we're waiting for that video to launch, I'll just tell you a little bit more about Malcolm Souter. He is part of the struggle to remove the Confederate statues in New Orleans, which you may have heard about recently. He is a member of Take 'em Down NOLA and the New Orleans Workers Group. And here he is. Here he will be in a couple seconds.
Brothers and sisters, this is Malcolm Souter speaking to you from New Orleans. Unfortunately, we're not able to attend the ANSWER conference this weekend, but we wish you much success. I'm relating to you a story that our organization here, Take 'em Down NOLA, has launched to remove the white supremacist monuments from the streets and public spaces of New Orleans. We were successful this past May in getting rid of 4 of these hated monuments, beginning early May with the dreaded white supremacy monument, better known among white races as the Liberty Monument. We also were able to take down successfully the Jefferson Davis statue that was prominently on Canal Street in New Orleans, the Beauregard statue, which grew people at our city park, and finally the Robert E. Lee statue, which was at what is called Lee Circle. This was a stunning success on our part because Take 'em Down NOLA has been organizing for the past 2 years. But people should know that this is not a recent phenomenon. This is a continuation of decades-long struggle by the black citizens of New Orleans to confront the purpose and meaning of these white supremacy monuments. Back in the 1970s, there was a concerted attempt to rid the city of the white supremacy monument, which used to be at the foot of Canal Street. And that was removed, but the descendants of the White League, which was a semi-Ku Klux Klan organization in the city of New Orleans, they sued successfully to have the white supremacy statue put back at Canal Street. And we were unfortunately able to put back up, but again we were successful in taking it down. What's important to understand about our struggle here in New Orleans is that because of our organized activity and our discipline, we were able to ensure that our Mayor Mitch Landry carried out his promise, which was made in July of 2017, to when he first proposed to put on we still come at the beginning and take that motion. We were satisfied with this effort to only take down 4 when there are hundreds of statues, street names, school names in this city. And so we will not be satisfied until that takes place. And we were able to build a coalition of community groups, college students, high school students, workers, and to successfully, in these past 2 years, keep the issue of the white supremacy monuments on the front page. We had a number of successful mobilizations at these statues all over the city where we were demanding that they be torn down. We were also able to challenge the mayor all along. When we first got the ordinance passed in December of 2017, the defenders of the statues filed an injunction that prevented the city from taking them down. But we continued to press the mayor that his legal staff had to work very, very hard to ensure that this happened. So after 18 months of deliberation, they finally agreed. During that time, of course, the white right organized and really prevented these things from happening. But we were true to our word, and we continued to fight and fight and fight, and so this past May, we were able to get these things taken out. What is interesting to note, of course, is that this attracted the white supremacists from all over the country to descend on New Orleans, openly carrying arms, saying that they were here to defend white supremacy statues. And we forced the city to finally deal with them and to make sure that they did not have these weapons at mass demonstrations. We also challenged the mayor to not take down these statues in the dark of the night. We pointed that was the Tower of Day and we challenged him to clear the start of the road. Was finally used the last statue to take down the week. And at that same time, the mayor made such an eloquent statement about his hatred for the falsity of the Confederate lost cause, and that he realized that these statues were a result of the black community, and that we should not be going forward as New Orleans approaches its 300th anniversary in 2018, that we should not go forward with these Confederate statues. But we pointed out the insincerity of the mayor, because if he really believed what he said, he would have gotten all these statues. And so that's where we're at this point. We have been contacted by people from all over the country who are raising struggles in more than 80 cities. And we are planning to have in New Orleans next year Southwide Conference of Anti-Racist Organizers. We invite you to get in touch with us, get on our website, takemdownnola.org, and come on down to New Orleans and join with us so we can share our experiences and see if we can improve our methods and our means of struggling against these white supremacists. And I'll end just saying victory to the people, power to the people, and down.
So that wraps up our first theme of Black community, but we're going to go right into our domestic costs of war panel. I would first like to say that as we all convene here in Richmond, let's not forget the lives lost, the internal wars that are at stake and happening as a result of internalized racism, oppression, and structural racism and oppression. And so I would just like to very briefly call out a few names of teenagers that we have lost at the hands of violence within Richmond. These are our babies, our kids, and I would just like to give a brief 5-second moment of silence for them. First is Christian Singleton, 15 years old, Kitron Wales, 16 years old, Talik Brown, 15 years old, Micasha Smoot, 16 years old, and Jarkeisha Billy Clanton, 18 years old, who was shot and killed 2 days ago. So can we please give them just a few seconds for a moment of silence? Thank you. We'll now go to Mr. Pat Elder of the National Coalition to Protect Student Privacy.
Thank you. I love you all. Thanks for listening to me. This is kind of like the Connect the Dots conference, and I got a dot. Wars start in high school cafeterias. And if we want to smash U.S. imperialism, that's where we might want to start. The military's United States Military Entrance Processing Command is having a hell of a difficult time recruiting enough youth for their wars. The word's gotten out. This is the Achilles heel of the empire. We can stop it in our local high schools. They can't get enough troops. There are 5 avenues of resistance in the public high schools as I see it. The first one has to do with the opt-out form. And I passed out my bullet points here, so it might help you make a little bit more sense. Basically, in 2001, the Bush administration passed legislation that commonly became known as the No Child Left Behind Act. In that piece of legislation, it basically says that if a military recruiter requests the names, addresses, and phone numbers of kids in a given high school, he is entitled to receive it, provided that the school lets parents know they have the right to opt out of those lists being given to recruiters. The legislation is weak because it really doesn't specifically mandate how the hell that's supposed to be. So in Richmond, a cursory look at 15 public high schools in the city shows that none of them have any public notice of the opt-out. So consequently, parents aren't being proactive in removing their children's names from lists that are forwarded to military recruiters. In Montgomery County, Maryland, about 10 years ago, I organized a coalition, and we went to the school system, and we said, you guys got to do a better job. Maybe put it on your website, maybe get some forms out. And they did. They mailed out notices in 6 languages. So did the next door school system. So did 5 or 6 school systems. Then we went to the state legislature in Maryland, and we passed a law that mandates the placement of the opt-out notice on the only form parents have to fill out every year, which is the emergency contact form. And up at the top right-hand corner of the form, it says, do you want your information going to the military about your kids, yes or no? And about 90% have opted out. So that's very cool. It's the only state in the country to have a legislation like this, and we've been working this issue for 10 years, and we've been lobbying legislatures across the country. We haven't been able to get in another state. So the opt-out is important. At the least, make sure that filling out the form is mandatory in your school. There's no reason for it. You can look at the law, look at the bullet points. The second avenue of resistance has to do with military testing in the public schools. The Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, or ASVAB for short, is given to 690,000 kids across the country every year in 14,000 high schools. Now, they parade this damn thing as some sort of career exploration program. You know, you take this 3.5-hour test, you relinquish your Social Security numbers, you fill out a 2-page form on your family's demographics, and that beats the hell out of name, address, and phone number. And nice boys and girls want to take this test because, well, it'll help them decide that they want to be a policeman, or they might want to be a fireman. They parade it as a career exploration program. And so the military is able to get very valuable cognitive information. So they don't just know that Johnny, what they find out on Facebook. They don't just know that, all the things that they find out. They have hundreds of different avenues. When yearbook companies, ring companies, when a kid goes online and he plays an online game and he fills out information, the military is buying up all this information. They have what's called JAMRS, which is the Joint Advertising Marketing Research Systems database. It covers 30 million kids between the ages of 16 and 24. And it has 200 to 300 columns of information. For God's sakes, they know if your kid has had gingivitis. What they don't know is how smart he is. And the ASVAB gives them that information. The ASVAB gives them information on whether he can factor polynomials, man. You know, whether he understands mechanics, how high his reading comprehension levels are. You can't get that on Facebook. You can't find that for free. You have to get it through the schools, and they do it through a deceptive and illegal program. In the state of Maryland and in 46 states across the country, it is illegal to take Social Security numbers away from students, from children under 18 years old without parental consent. And the military marches into your schools in Richmond and does it almost on a daily basis. Be great to stop it. No reason. We have 1,000 schools across the country that force all their juniors and seniors to take a military enlistment test. You want to stop imperialism? You might want to call your high school. Marksmanship programs. Might be appropriate for me to mention the racist angle employed by the United States military. You know, man, it's been 7 or 8 years ago, we passed a law in the state of Maryland that mandates, that says, hey, military, you can't test boys and girls in the state of Maryland without having parental consent. And so I went to Eldridge James, who was the head of the NAACP. We had lunch in Annapolis. It's great. He goes, what do you got, man? You know, you got some data? And I gave him a list of high schools where the ASVAB is given. It was really cool because he looked at it for about 30 seconds and says, yeah, man, I'm cool. I'll sign. I'll testify for you. Because the nice, white, rich schools don't give the ASVAB. Why would a kid in Bethesda want to take the ASVAB? He's going to Brown, man. He's going to Cornell. So, yeah, it's a major wow. Another avenue of resistance is the marksmanship program, okay? The marksmanship program has exploded under the Obama administration. We have 2,400 schools now that have active marksmanship programs. You have schools in the state of Virginia and schools in Richmond where children actually use classrooms to shoot .177 caliber lead projectiles at targets 50 feet away. It used to be that they used these 22 caliber rifles. A 22 caliber rifle, the kind that, time's up, guys, I'm sorry. But here's the rest of it right here, and if you would take a look at my website, I'd appreciate it. God bless you, man. It's up here.
Okay, so thank you so much. I want to have us give a brief round of applause to our first round of speakers, and then I would like our second round of speakers to please take the stage. And while that's happening, I'm going to introduce our next speaker. So our next round of issues is going to be immigrant struggles, labor, and LGBTQ issues. So the first person up is going to be Carolina Velez with ICE out of RVA. Yeah, folks, if you're on my next speakers list, please come take the stage.
We're going.
Come on.
We're out of here.
We're going.
Yeah, the switch off is always a little weird, but I find it makes it so much smoother between speakers. Thank you so much, and Carolina, you're up.
Oh, someone left their cell phone here.
That's mine. Thanks much.
Buenas tardes a todos. Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Carolina Velez. I am one of the organizers with ICE out of RVA, or La Migra Fuera de Richmond. And I was invited to share with you a little bit about this group. I agree because I think that we are in a political moment where it is so important to build resistance on the base. And that's what ICE out of RVA is. ICE out of RVA was created by a group of community-based organizers that are in the communities that are struggling with immigration or ICE coming to their home every single day, patrolling every single day their communities, and also having the police partnering with them and coming every day into their homes with excuses of building partnership with the community between the police and people in the neighborhoods. So this is a group of people that, because of what has been happening, and not only with this current administration, but with the Obama administration, where it has been where we saw most of the arrest of people in ICE custody, right? We came together and say, we cannot continue this situation happening. We need to be able to create a response where we don't depend on the police, where we don't depend from all of these systems that has been killing us and oppressing us. And when I say us, it is very important because this is one of the local groups that, through political-based education, when we come together, just drinking cafe and eating bread and building community within us, we start talking about, why did we migrate here? Why are we here? Is it because of the same thing that the oppressor has been telling us? Or is it because of things like colonization? Is it because of US invading our countries in Latin America and around the world? Is it because it is not only an immigrant issue, but that we need to be able to have these conversations about anti-Blackness with the people that are called my people and myself, with perception that has been so ingrained on us, that when we come here, we see the child in the community that we organize at the garden, seeing one Black neighbor walking by the garden and saying and looking at me and saying, Carolina, I am scared. A 4-year-old has that concept? Being scared of Blackness? We have a deep issue within our communities, and this system of oppression is doing a very good job on keeping all of us, the people of color, divided. So I sat of our VA, well, yes, we go and do rallies. We go and sit with the mayor and say, you need to stop collaborating with us. At the base, we are having these deep conversations because regardless if we are in Richmond or we go back to our country, we're gonna continue facing the same criminalization of our people. So to be able to respond to this, we have this political education that is ingrained, as I said, by building community and by learning by the Black movement that that's how we support each other. We cannot continue waiting for the outsider to come and save us. We need to be able to stand up together with the people that is with us and fight this demon, this evil, these colonizers, this white supremacy. We created rapid response team, and it was by the decision of the people that are part of this group to bring allies that can be at the face, that can be at the front. And when ICE or the police comes to someone's house in the community, there are allies in Richmond that respond immediately to the house. And that is from videotaping what the police and ICE are doing when they are at someone's house, but also to be able to make decisions in that moment to escalate the situation and put their bodies in between the people that this system wants to continue stealing from our families and their system. So that's one of the responses. The other response is that as a community group, we are not reformist. We don't believe in reforming this system. We believe in abolishing this system. We do not want to continue playing the same game and being sold to the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. So by taking these stands that have taken a lot of people in this city saying, those are the revolutionaries, we should not sit with them. And even people within our struggle saying, you need to talk kinder. You need to learn how to talk better. And through the political education and understanding the connection between everybody's struggle and the reason why we are here, it is that our community leaders can stand in front of the superintendent of the schools, can stand in front of the mayor and say, I am not playing your game. You are playing by the cards that my community is telling you to play. And if you are not willing to play it, we are moving out of the table. So for some people in the city has been that we move slow and that we don't want to interact with other groups. And that is not the case. We want to play the game with groups that we also have a coalition with other organizations and individuals that are willing to take that risk of not being reformist and being sold to the system, but to build a base of people that is not depending on those systems. This is not the face of the group, the face that you are looking at now. There are muchos, like my shirt says, and that my shirt is very polite. It says, no somos uno, no somos 10, somos millones, cuéntanos bien. But the word that we say is, no somos uno, no somos 2, somos un chingo, cuéntanos bien. We are not 1, we are not 10. We are more than hundreds. Count us well. We are in solidarity with everybody, and as Philando's mother said in her video yesterday, they are not only killing my son, they're coming after you. And something that my community and other people of color community need to understand is that, yes, they're coming after all of us, and they're telling that they are not coming for us. Thank you so much.
No peace, no work. I got 8 minutes. I'm gonna use every one of them.
Can you introduce yourself since I didn't?
I took note of that. My name is Clarence Thomas. I'm a third-generation longshoreman. I am a member of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, Local 10. But very quickly, I want to pick up where Brother Saladin Muhammad left off when he talked about black workers working for black liberation within the labor movement. Although I was asked to speak today around the question of political strikes, and I'm going to get to that. But the first thing you need to understand is that the organization that I represent, or I'm retired now. I'm retired from the waterfront, but I'm not retired from the struggle. What you need to understand very quickly is that in 1934, there was a West Coast maritime strike. And at that time, San Francisco was the leading maritime city in the world. There was a strike for the purpose of stopping the shape up. And for those of you who are young enough to remember On the Waterfront with Marlon Brando, a shape up meant that workers had to engage in dehumanizing activity in order to get a job, because it was all based upon nepotism, racism, favoritism. And so the bosses would pick and choose who could go to work, pitting one man against another. Isn't that familiar? Divide and conquer. So we wanted to end the shape up. So we called for a workers' control hiring hall. That was a revolutionary concept. You mean the workers would actually dispatch the jobs? Yeah. Well, what unfolded was this. In order to win that strike in 1934, when black people were not encouraged to be members of a union and relied on labor struggles to scab. This is during the Depression now. Can you imagine? Unions shutting down the port. It's an opportunity for black folks to go to work. So there was an immigrant who was the head of the strikers committee. His name was Harry Bridges. He was also an immigrant too. Not from Latin America. He was from Australia, who understood the class struggle. He, along with other leftists, communists, anarchists, and others, who understood that they were not going to win that strike without the support of the black community. Bridges and others went to the black community in 1934, San Francisco and Oakland, and appealed to various pastors to let them speak, to convey this message that if the black community supported the strike, they would be represented on all the ports on the West Coast. You know what? The community believed him. They couldn't have won that strike without the black community. That's a bit of history that very few people know, and it should be known by everybody. Now, fast forward. In 1935, when Mussolini invaded Ethiopia, our Union brothers refused to load zinc and nickel that was going to fascist Italy. 1939, when Japan invaded Manchuria, our brothers refused to load scrap iron destined to Japan because Bridges and the rank and file believed that that scrap iron would be used as weapons against American GIs. And that came into fruition with the attack on Pearl Harbor. Fast forward to 1981. Many of you think that the Ku Klux Klan only operates in the South. Well, many of you know about the Midwest too in Indiana. But they also operate in the Bay Area too. 1981, one of our members moved to a section of Contra Costa County. Ku Klux Klan attacked him. Longshoremen went to his defense, literally, with shotguns and rifles to protect him. And then after that, hired security guards for the brother. This is a union where an African American, and I referred to him last night by the name of Leo Robinson, who wrote that resolution after the Soweto massacre, calling for boycotting of South African cargo. In 1978, he and other rank and filers founded the Southern African Liberation Support Committee. You know what they did? They went to our employers and said, "We need containers from you." They loaded those containers with clothes, medical supplies, and other humanitarian goods. That container went to Tanzania, where the ANC had a major base. This is the kind of tradition where I come from. It's important for people to understand that the political strikes that have been the most significant for me since I was a member of Local 10 has come about during the last 3 years. And there may be some in this room who don't know it because it really hasn't been very much publicized by the bourgeois press. Starting in 2015, when Local 10 shut down all 5 Bay Area ports, condemning police terror. Why is that important? Because we in the ILWU understand the relationship between the police and capital. Because in 1934, July 5th, we had 2 strikers of that great strike to be shot in the back by the police. We memorialized that date by calling it Bloody Thursday. And for 24 hours, we don't work on that day. So it's not difficult for our rank and file members to understand the importance of the ILWU standing up for Black Lives Matter. Because we understand that the police, whenever there is a labor dispute, when the police come out, who do they come out for? The bosses. When they come out and there's a labor dispute, they can't tell us, are we going to make a line for you workers to go to work? That's BS. They say, I got 1 minute left. Are you sure? All right, well, I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to give it a long, short wrap up. I left something out. October 2010, we shut down 5 Bay Area ports calling for jail for killer cops and justice for Oscar Grant. But you know, I'm getting fed up with coming to conferences like this where I don't see any other labor unions saying, hey, we follow the example of Local 10. We follow the example of the ILWU and shut down all the 29 ports. And in closing, what you should all know is that just this past April, our Longshore Caucus, which is the highest ruling body of longshoremen on the West Coast, voted to take off every May Day starting in 2018. Now, you're applauding, but the other shoe hasn't dropped yet. We don't know what the employer's response is going to be. But we're going to need your support. Don't let Local 10 and the ILWU become isolated. This is not an intellectual exercise. People's lives are on the line. And this situation that just went down yesterday in Minneapolis regarding Brother Philando Castile is totally bull. You know what I'm talking about. And if we're not going to have some kind of political and economic consequences when this kind of bullshit goes on, things are not going to change. An injury to one is an injury to all.
All right, everybody, that was Clarence Thomas, former Secretary-Treasurer of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union. Coming up next for you, I have a double feature. We've got Ashley and Iman. They are representing the fight for $15 minimum wage. This is Raise Up, Fight for 15. All right, you're up.
That was the quickest 8 minutes I've ever seen. I don't believe it. I'm accepting.
Hello, everyone. Hello. My name is Ashley Little. I'm with Virginia Raise Up Fight for 15. The union started in New York when workers walked off their job because of low wages. And me being a fast food worker and working at McDonald's, I can understand. I only made $7.33 an hour, working 40 hours. I couldn't get Medicaid. I couldn't get any help with bills or anything like that. I was struggling, became homeless, had a lot going on at that time, still not making enough to even feed me half the time. I've been with Fight for 15 for almost a year now, and they have been helping me trying to raise the minimum wage up to $15 in the union. They have been a big part of my life because I know how it is to struggle when you have families and parents who have kids. $7.33 ain't even gonna feed one child, let alone two. So I can understand how it is. In the United States, they pay more to go out for war than they do paying their own city to raise the minimum wage. And I'm not going to stand by and let it be like that. I'm going to have a voice and I'm going to use it.
Hello, my name is Iman Bouzid, and I'm an organizer with the Fight for 15. And, you know, I got involved in this movement when I came out here to go to college at VCU. And it's just unfortunate. You know, I'm fortunate enough to be able to go to school and be able to have parents that are able to help me to do that. But the fact is that a lot of folks can't do that on what they're making. And, you know, the U.S. maintaining legitimacy as an imperial power is more than just being a powerful nation. You know, it's laying down the rules that America wants across the world. You know, the U.S. has spent billions on military activity in places such as Libya, Yemen, Afghanistan, to promote democracy, so-called democracy, when, you know, here at home, we're not promoting democracy. It is a human rights violation not to pay people for the work that they're doing. It diminishes their access to education, their political access, their ability to get health care, just basic needs. And it's very unfortunate that that's something that we're having to deal with here. It's very unfortunate that we can even make a claim that we're going to another place to help them when it's hypocritical at the end of the day. So, you know, that's why we're fighting to raise our wages, and that's why we're fighting to promote the rights of poor and working class people. And, you know, I just want to say, I'm not going to take the whole 8 minutes, but I want to say, you know, I want to end by saying, you know, I want to say no to unnecessary war, unnecessary intervention, and we need to continue to start saying yes to working people. Thank you.
All right, thank you both. All right, so slight change of plans, but I think you're going to like it. So recently, we do have one more speaker after this, but we just got in the solidarity message from the USW Local 8751 District 4. This is the Boston School Bus Drivers Union. Let's have a hand for them. All right, so I'm going to try to do it justice, but I know that I can't. I've read this, and it's an impressive piece. But so just bear with me, please. So the title is Local 8751 Pledges Solidarity and Support and Wishes All Success to the United National Anti-War Coalition and its conference in Richmond, Virginia. We regret that we are unable to be with UNAC at your important and timely conference in Richmond today, but our thoughts and solidarity are there with you. As we gather this morning in the bus yards at 4 a.m., we're watching and sharing the news from our homelands around the world, from Alabama and Georgia, Haiti, Cabo Verde, Vietnam, Honduras, Trinidad, and Ethiopia. Top of the news today is massive new U.S. troop movements in Afghanistan. Yesterday, it was 3 dead soldiers and hundreds more from that nation, which has been under attack and occupied by the United States since 1979, a year we struck to win our first contract. Yesterday, the news included bodies in the streets of Port-au-Prince shot down during a demonstration against the U.S./UN's selected government. The day before, it was U.S. troops participating in the slaughter in the Philippines. Last week, it was horrible video of wealthy Venezuelans cheered on by the billionaire gangster Trump administration and its secretary of ExxonMobil, burning and stabbing to death a black supporter of the first bus driver president in world history. Not long ago, it was the mother of all bombs, obliterating a country Afghani town and dozens of cruise missiles slamming into a Syrian airport, both independent countries on the other side of the planet. We fight the Veolia Transdev Corporation and the city of Boston every day as its millionaire CEOs and sponsor politicians steal our time, fire and suspend us, slash our and our children's routes, conspire to cut budgets, and constantly attack our hard-won union rights. But the people of Somalia, Korea, and Yemen never did anything against us. We have friends and family in Flint, Michigan, who've been poisoned and still can't drink the water that Veolia and its criminal co-conspirators were paid to pump from that filthy river. We have friends and family who are being snatched up by ICE and who can't travel home to bury our loved ones. We have friends and family who are being evicted or foreclosed from our homes, who are literally hungry in one of the wealthiest cities in the world, who are being kicked off their health insurance and denied disability benefits, who are working low-paid jobs at nursing homes and hospitals into their old age and often until death, having no savings to enjoy retirement. There are children on our buses who disappear every week into the new, very expensive prefabricated juvenile prison on the edge of Franklin Park. We say our war is at home. We demand with UNAC that all U.S. troops be brought home immediately. We call with UNAC for trillions of dollars for housing, health care, union jobs, education, and healthy food for all. We have been in the streets nearly every week for months to protest fascist-minded politicians, police violence against our children and our LGBTQ family, ICE repression of our coworkers, and war budgets that slash our rightful social services. We look forward to joining all the forces of UNAC in your plans to take to the streets in massive protests to end the U.S. war machine once and for all. In solidarity, Andre Francois, President, Steve Kirschbaum, Vice President, Gary Murchison, Grievance Com, and Steve Gillis, Financial Secretary. All right, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I did that justice. Next up, we have LGBTQ issues. And unfortunately, we're only able to get one panelist, so I'm going to go ahead and read her whole bio. So today we have with us Shabana Shaheen. She is from Song. She is a they are a DC native who currently organizes and resides in Richmond. They're a member of Song Richmond, a Southern LGBTQ liberation organization in the South. Shabana also serves as the executive director of the National Association for Ethnic Studies and is a recent graduate of Virginia Commonwealth University around issues, receiving a Master's of Sociology. I'm sorry, I've been reading too many things for too long. Shabana also organizes around issues within the South Asian diaspora in the U.S. and Kashmiri liberation, and here they are.
Hello. That statement is a tough one to follow. It was a great solidarity statement. When I was asked to speak here today and thinking about anti-war struggles and LGBT folks, I was thinking about what it means to be anti-war. And for me, being anti-war is about being anti-military. We know that this country and very much of how the economy, our society, our politics are organized around our military and that for the sake of quote-unquote homeland security. And when I think of anti-war and being anti-military, that means a fundamental question of what violence means, what safety means, what security means. And for LGBTQ folks, those are questions we always have. For our history, our struggles, it's always been a question of how do we keep safe? How do we find security? And how do we stop the violence against our communities? So I'm a member of SONG, which is Southerners on New Ground. We're a queer Southern liberation organization. And basically we are focusing on building a Southern community for the South. And one of the things that we do isn't just focus on the idea of us being queer folks organizing, but that we are a part of a larger struggle for liberation. And we believe that liberation and freedom can't happen unless LGBTQ folks are also liberated. So when we talk about being anti-capitalist, we talk about fighting anti-blackness, anti-racism, gender discrimination, among all the other issues we discuss. We have to make sure we remember that LGBTQ folks occupy all those identities. And if we are going to continue to perpetuate homophobia, transphobia, and not stand up for LGBTQ brothers and sisters, then we actually won't be free. There's no way we're actually going to get free unless we build a movement that is inclusive of all its folks. Because in many ways, LGBTQ folks are the backbone of so many of our movements, whether it's Black Lives Matter or many anti-war struggles. Many of the folks at ICE out of RVA are also queer folks doing that work. And so to me, that's really important to stress that anti-war doesn't just mean we're against the military and occupation and war. It means that we're about getting free, and getting free means LGBTQ folks must have our support. And I wanted to just share what Song RVA has been working on here in the community. We've been working on fine-tuning the needs of our community here. We believe in getting our community involved. Just because we're an LGBTQ organization doesn't mean that we're not doing things and working towards issues that touch everyone in our communities. And so we've been working on scrutinizing the Richmond Police Department for their role in harassing Black residents, harassing LGBTQ folks, particularly trans Black women, and their relationship with the police, which has historically been a very violent one. And so we've been thinking through ways in which we can make that happen. And we know that liberation work is not a short-term thing, it's a long-term thing that you have to commit to. So we have two ways of doing it. We think of the short-term work of protecting and defending. And much like ICE out of RVA, we think about how we can help our people now. People need a meal, how can we help them? People need help with job applications, how can we help them? People need someone to watch their children so they can come to our organizing meetings, how can we help them? Things like that. Those are part of the short-term goals of liberation for us. And the long-term eventually, obviously, is police abolition, because truly, there is no good police officer. There's no reforming a system that's inherently created to hunt and pillage Black bodies. So we don't believe in reform. So short term, we're thinking about a community review board for our Richmond Police Department, meaning an independent review board, which has some oversight and some ways of holding our police accountable. This is the short-term goal. Obviously, the long-term is abolition. But right now, what can we do for our folks here in Richmond to make sure that we can start to address the violence that they face from the police? And then long-term, we're thinking, what does it mean to have the abolition, police abolition? That means thinking through what does security mean? And going back to the question of, so if being anti-war means questioning security and safety, whose security and safety are we worried about? Whose security and safety is threatened, and whose security and safety are we working towards maintaining and defending? And what does defending even mean? When we think about what war is, it's about quote-unquote defending our interests. Whose interests are we defending? And so our work is really about questioning those things and putting people, centering folks that are really at the margins of this. That's Black folks, that's working class folks, that's LGBTQ folks. And so I'm not gonna take up the whole 8 minutes, but I will say that again, we can't get free unless LGBTQ folks are a part of your movement. So at the end of the day, we're here, we're queer, and we're the backbone of most of the work that needs to get done, so.
All right, and that was Shabana Shaheen, folks. Okay, this concludes our panel. I want to give a big thank you to all of our speakers. Excellent, excellent work. So it is finally lunchtime, but I will caution you that because things have been running a little bit late, please try to get back here a little bit early if you can. There is a list of nearby restaurants on the website, so if you're able to access that, there is free Wi-Fi available out in the lobby. That'll give you an idea of where to go, how far it is, how much it costs, and what you can eat there. Thank you all so much, and see you soon.